The Shinsengumi were preparing to depart from Edo, passing through Nagarayama. Meh. The Shinsengumi were preparing to depart from Edo, passing through Nagarayama to arrive eventually in Aizu. The news came not too long after the departure of Nagakura and Harada, whose absence still resonated solely with those of us still faithful to the Shinsengumi. Word of our eventual departure to Aizu came rather unexpectedly, leading to the frantic scramble of many warriors hurriedly preparing for a mass migration. I too did my part before it came time to leave. I noticed we were short on medical supplies and our stock of medicines, so I wanted to fetch some before we moved to Nagarayama. I mean, are you sure? Heisuke snuck an inquisitive glance towards Sanan-San's room, nudging his nose off to the side. Good point. Then I'd love for you to join me. After making the rounds of the shops, we'd finally assumed what we needed for our medical stock. We finally amassed what we needed for our medical stock, and we leisurely strolled back towards the compounds. Commotion rumbled on the other side of the street, with crowds of people chanting, "Isn't it great? Isn't it great?" with great fervor. Oh. Ah. Until recently, our safety under Hijikata-san's dutiful leadership had never been called into question. But after suffering back-to-back defeats of both Toba Fushimi and Kofu, things were beginning to change. Would we, as Heisuke put it, realistically have any chance of victory in Aizu? Perhaps more pertinently, did Heisuke have any more desire to fight, especially all the way in Aizu? As we passed a dim alley, Heisuke blurted out, Huh? Heisuke yanked my arm, leading me behind a building from which we slowly peeked our heads. Footsteps echoed ominously in the alley. By the sound of their pace, it was a man and a woman. Was it a rendezvous or something else?
Hold
on a second. Ah! I knew I recognized her name in the fucking credits. And it's hers.
じゃないか踊りしてる連中の絵姿を100枚素書きして持ってこいなんてさ。
でも勉強になるでしょ？
そりゃな。だけど踊ってる奴らに絡まれるといろいろ面倒なんだよ。あいつら金持ちの家に上がり込んで家の中をめちゃくちゃにしたりするって聞くしな。
うちは別に心配ないじゃない。盗まれるものなんて一つもないし。
Did she just say our home? Oh.
もし商売道具を持っていかれたらどうすんだよ。紙だって絵の具だってただじゃないんだぞ。
Heisuke stared intently at the couple in conversation until the two of them were well beyond earshot. He widened his eyes in astonishment before muttering strangely under his breath.
龍之介のやつ元気だったんだ。しかも一緒にいた子。
Do you know them?
あ、まあ知り合いっつうかそんな感じだったんだ。
Then shouldn't you have said hello? We aren't going to be in Edo for much longer. You may never get the chance to do so again.
いいんだ。俺はもう死んだ人間だし、せっかく幸せそうにしてんのに今さら俺たちのことを思い出させるなんて野暮じゃねえか。
Heisuke's mood completely soured, sort of how I imagine his reaction to be when Nagakura and Harada announced their departure from the Shinsengumi. But this was different. Whatever inner turmoil he'd kept hidden beneath the skin was now exposed, and for once, Heisuke seemed utterly vulnerable. As if the burden he'd been carrying for so long had finally become too much to bear. Heisuke inhaled deeply through his nose and closed his eyes, pausing for a moment before releasing his exhale through his mouth.
あいつさ、まだ新選組にいた頃は芹沢さん、局長の一人だった人に毎日殴られてて、ここを出たらどうやって生きていけばいいのかわからないなんて言ってて、自分の生き方を見つけられずにあがいてたところが司令官に流れ着く前の俺みたいで、なんか放っておけなかったんだけど、あいつちゃんと自分の道を見つけられたんだな。すっげえ幸せそうだった。
I noticed something peculiar as soon as Heisuke mentioned the words, smiling from ear to ear. Suddenly, a dreary expression covered Heisuke's face, as if he were a child who'd been abandoned to wander through the city alone. Heisuke, keeping his back facing me, continued to reminisce.
きっとあいつらこれから先もさ、二人で苦労していくんだろうな。いや、好きな相手と一緒にいられるんだから、どんなに苦労してもどうってことねえか。あと数年も経てば可愛い子供が生まれたりすんのかな。
Oh, Heisuke! Saying that those two will have a kid or two. They're adorable. Oh my god, the thought of that.
子供もそのうちどんどん大きくなって、じいさんばあさんになる頃にはたくさんの孫に囲まれてさ、俺はそんな幸せなんて多分絶対手に入れられねえけど。
Heisuke watched his friend rise from humble beginnings to forge a meaningful life for himself outside of the Shinsengumi. Yet here stood Heisuke, keenly aware of all that he would stand to miss because of his affliction, unable to partake in the greeting of an old friend. Simple pleasures and milestones alike were becoming increasingly out of reach for Heisuke, who was forced to watch the world turn without him. How much more anguish would he be forced to endure? It tore me apart seeing him like this, so I quietly nestled up closely to him. There was something so comforting and familiar about his scent. You have me. Even if one day everyone else were to disappear, I would still be here right beside you, Heisuke. His back shivered as I ran the tips of my fingers against it.
バカだなお前。俺いつ寿命を使い果たしちまうかわからねえんだぞ。そんな俺と一緒にいたっていいことなんてなんもねえだろ。
His tone was derisive. That much I could tell. But it was a reaction that had not required explanation. I'm not staying with you because I expect to gain something from it. Perhaps there was a hint of truth to his cynical claim that it was unlikely he would live for much longer. Perhaps he had interpreted my concern for him as pity, and he had given up fighting the inevitable. Nonetheless, I was determined to support Heisuke. Whether or not he could take his sentiment at face value was for him to decide, but...
ほんと、物好きだよな。お前って。
At the beginning of our conversation, Heisuke's voice was meek and quivering, but by the end, it seemed he turned a corner, sharing with me a playful grin. A breast-gentle air rattled wind chimes around the compounds on the Shinsengumi's last night in Edo. A knock upon my door startled me around midnight.
Yukimura senpai, まだ起きてらっしゃいますか?
Salma, is that you? Oh, I'm awake. Is everything okay?
来客です。何でも先輩にお聞きしたいことがあるとかで。
Me? A visitor? Who could it have been? I'm gonna guess it's Sen and Kimigiku. Understandably, I was a little confused, and I cautiously followed Soma to greet my surprised guest.
あ、千鶴さん。夜分遅く申し訳ありません。
It's Kimigiku! What's going on, Kimigiku? I heard you had something to ask of me.
姫様があなたの招きに応じてこちらにいらしているはずですが、いつまで経ってもお戻りにならないので何かあったのではと思いまして。
Ah, shit. What? You are mistaken. I haven't sent any message to Sen.
それは本当ですか？今日の夕刻、姫様は松本先生を通じてあなたからの文を受け取ったはずなのですが。
What? Are you sure? I've sent no letters for Sen.
ということは、何者かがあなたの名を語って。
Someone. But there are only a few people who are aware of Sen's presence in Edo, or even about her connection with Matsumoto Sensei, isn't that right?
ええ、あなた方と松本先生以外にはお伝えしていないはずです。
So, that means the only other people who know about her whereabouts are myself, Heisuke, and Sanan-San. Wait a minute. That's right. Sanan-San was with us. Sanan-San was with us the day we encountered her. He was fully aware of how to reach Sen and where she would be. Just then.
あれ、千鶴、それに確か君菊さん。
Heisuke stepped into the quiet courtyard, perhaps overhearing our nervous voices increasing in volume. Heisuke? Where's Sanan-san?
Sanan-san なら部屋で本を読んでるはずだけど。
Kimigiku, wait here. I'll go check up on him. I ran hurriedly towards Sanan-san's room, squinting my eyes to make out the hallway through the darkness. When I got to his door, there was no sign of him. It was too late. It seemed he had snuck out of the compounds without any of us noticing.
Chizuru, どうだった？三男さんいたか？
I couldn't find him in his room.
ってことはまさか。
すぐに行方を追いましょう。嫌な予感がします。
Wanting not to waste a second more, Kimigiku, Heisuke, and I bolted in search of Sanan-San. The nerve of him to forge my name in order to trick Sen into coming to meet him. Just what could Sanan-San have been plotting? A creeping sense of dread took a hold of me. All I could plead was for Sen's safety to be ensured, a hollow gesture, but what else could I do? After a frustrating yield of no results, the three of us split up to widen our search, but
くそ、見つからねえな。三男さんどこに行っちまったんだ。
darn, it's almost time for us to meet back with Kimigiku.
そうだな。見つけてくれるといいんだけど。
Just as Heisuke mentioned the thought, a violent gust appeared out of nowhere, forming into a tall whirlwind. And then, Kimigiku stepped from out of the gust.
お二人ともいかがでしたか？姫様の足取りはつかめましたか？
Unfortunately not. Were you able to find anything at all, Kimigiku?
私の方も手がかりを見つけ出すことはできませんでした。
Heisuke, can you think of anywhere, any place at all that he might have possibly gone to?
そう言われてもな。
I have an idea in my head where he could have gone, but I don't know if Chizuru will realize it.
あの人のことだから俺が予想できるような場所に行くってことはねえんじゃねえかな。
Oh no. Suddenly the panic began to feel very, very real. Whatever purpose Sanan-San had for questioning Sen was alarming, but for him to do so in this manner... Was all of it a ploy to obtain more crucial information on the Furies from her? That seemed unlikely, given that he hadn't needed to approach her secrecy for a reason like that. After a moment, Kimigiku locked eyes with us.
お二人ともひとまず屯所に戻られてはいかがでしょう。
そうだな。もしかしたら三男さんが戻ってきてるかもしれねえし。
Where are you off to from here, Kimigiku?
私はもう少し姫様の行方を探してみます。姫様はあなたや風間千景と同じ純血の鬼ですから、人間やまがい物に遅れを取ることはないでしょうが、万が一ということもありますから。もし何かあればすぐにお伝えします。それでは。
Please be careful, Kimigiku. Kimigiku smiled graciously at me in return. With that, she vanished into the ether, leaving a mist-like cloud in her wake.
千姫、早く見つかるといいな。
Both of us nodded in unison, and we turned around to head back in the direction of the compounds. As we made our arrival, Heisuke blurted aloud.
おい、千鶴、見ろ！あそこに立ってるのは。
I glanced in the direction to which Heisuke was pointing at. Lo and behold, there stood Sen and Sanan-San. The two of them appeared to be engaged in a heated argument, but it was difficult for us to overhear.
何を話してるんだ？もう少し近づいてみるか。
Heisuke and I tiptoed as quietly as humanly possible. We were just within range of hearing them when... Sen suddenly shot an inquisitive glance in our direction, catching us both by surprise. Before either of us had a chance to react, Sanan-San took advantage of her being distracted, forcefully grabbing a hold of her to draw her in. What we witnessed next was completely unexpected. What? Oh God, what has Sanan-San done? What is going on? Okay. I didn't expect this. Sanan-San fiendishly planted his mouth upon Sen's, forcing her into an unwanted aggressive kiss. Such an egregious act had bewildered me without question, and I stood frozen to the spot. Sen attempted to force Sanan-San back, struggling to put any distance between the two of them, much less to break free from the clutches of his face. However, because of his fingers firmly gripping her arm, she was unable to free herself at all. After the painfully uncomfortable moment, Sanan-San had finally separated himself from Sen. As Sen was caught in a violent coughing fit, I saw thick red beads drip from out of her mouth. Uh-oh. Was that blood? Oh no, please, anything but that. Sanan-San turned to face us and plastered across his face with a mischievous grin that made my hair stand.
おや、東堂君に雪村君、どこかにお出かけでしたか。それともわざわざ見届けに来てくれたのでしょうかね。彼女が仮説となる様を。
You bastard! You fucker! Why? For what reason?
仮説だって。三男さん、あんたまさか落ち水を。
正確には違いますね。私はもう落ち水など必要とはしていません。この私の体を流れる血そのものが落ち水と化しているのですから。私の血を与えれば人は羅刹となり、私が下したどんな命令にでも従うようになる。
Fuck.
私はもはやただの羅刹ではありません。人の世のノリにとらわれることなく血を求め続けた結果、羅刹を超える羅刹となったのです。
I had no idea whether or not Sanan-San had been telling the truth, but behind his nefarious eyes was an insanity that I had never seen in any previous encounter with a Fury. Sen, stay strong! I tried sprinting over to Sen in an effort to check up on her, but Sanan-San had other ideas.
彼女に気安く触れることは許しませんよ。北の地に築く我ら羅刹の国の名手となってもらう身ですからね。
Did he just say future queen of their Fury Kingdom? Oh my God, Sanan-San. What the fuck? A Fury Kingdom?
そうです。比類なき力を持った純血の鬼さえもこの私の前に膝を屈した。 彼女の存在は千の言葉を尽くすより雄弁に我々の力を物語ってくれるでしょう。
He did? What? Sanan-san, don't tell me you've tainted Sen for the selfish reason of trying to prove how powerful Furies are!
そんなこととはご挨拶ですね。人より鬼より優れた我々がこの国を統べるものとなる。これ以上に崇高な目的があるとでも。
なんさ、あんたおかしくなっちまったんじゃねえのか。
私は至って正気ですよ。ああ、理解してもらおうとは思いませんがね。
Heisuke unsheathed his katana out of frustration. The blade trembled in his shaky hands.
そんなことさせるわけにはいかねえ。力ずくでもあんたを止めてみせるぜ。
止めるですって。報道君、君がそこまで愚かだとは思いませんでしたよ。君ごとき左手だけでも叩き伏せることができますが、せっかくですからあなたの力を試させてもらいましょうか。姫君、出番ですよ。そこの二人を殺しなさい。
Sanan-san's eerie eyes glowed frighteningly, and he gestured to an increasingly fervent Sen.
誰？あんたなんかの命令を。
Despite Sanan's best efforts, Sen retained some of her autonomy. Sen retained some of her autonomy, wincing through gritted teeth. Her thick head of hair was damp with sweat, which dripped down her forehead and onto her chin. Resisting Sanan-san's orders was no mean feat, a sight made all too clear by Sen's disheveled appearance.
まだ正気を保っているとはなかなか気丈な方ですね。さすが純血の鬼だけある。これはしつけがいがあるというものです。あっさりと従ってくれた彼らとは違ってね。
Oh my. Sanan turned his head and glanced suggestively at us. Just then, peeking through the darkness were dozens of tiny red eyes gazing at us. We were surrounded. They were everywhere, atop the roof of the compounds, besides shadows on the wall and within the mansion. Sanan-san had been able to hide, let alone recruit so many Furies, utterly baffled me, and each instance of eyes appearing petrified me into a state of shock.
なんだよこいつら。羅刹隊にいた奴らは風間たちの襲撃を受けた時や鳥羽伏見の戦、それからこの間の騒ぎでほとんど死んじまったはずだよな。三男さん、あんたまさか江戸の人たちを。
力を与え、人を超える生き物に生まれ変わらせてあげたのですよ。
Sanan-san's eyes glimmered eerily behind his thick frames, grinning in pride as he admitted his act. For him, there was nothing to apologize for, as apparently all along it had been his intention to infect the world with this vile affliction.
ずっと思ってた。三男さん、あんたはすげえ人だって。甘っちょろい俺とは違って、何を残して何を切り捨てるべきか、情を交えず正しい判断を下せる。新選組を大きくしていくためには絶対に必要な人だって。だけど
こんなやり方だけは何があっても絶対に認められねえ。
Heisuke was enraged, fighting back tears as he spewed all of his pain at Sanan-San.
俺たちは上洛してから5年間ずっと今日の人たちを守ってきたんだろう。あんたは新選組幹部だった頃の志まで捨てるつもりなのかよ。
Heisuke's incensed screaming made me flinch nervously, but Sanan-San barely even lifted his eyebrows.
忘れてしまいましたよ、人であった頃のことなど。何の役にも立たない情など君はこれから先もずっと抱えて続けるつもりですか。
After delivering his icy retort, Sanan-San turned once more to face Sen.
鬼の姫君に羅刹の白むくをまとってもらうにはしばしの時間が必要なようです。お色直しに少々時間をいただくとしましょうか。
待て、サンナさん。
Heisuke darted towards where Sanan-San stood until a troop of vehement furies blocked his path.
お前ら邪魔するんじゃね
え。 Heisuke swung at them boorishly, hoping they'd fan away. However, the sheer volume of troops made navigating the path impossible, each of them returning Heisuke's angry gesture with baiting strikes and shoves. Heisuke! In the hopes of supporting Heisuke, I unsheathed my kodachi, but... For every fury hacked down by Heisuke, two more would instantly appear in its place. Sanan-san watched Heisuke struggle with glee, sticking his tongue out as the pungent sting of blood filled the air. Once more, he turned to look at Sen. As their eyes locked, Sen's body suddenly went limp, and she dropped to the floor unconscious. Sanan-san lowered himself, lifting her up to his shoulder.
それでは東堂君、生きていればまたお会いしましょう。君のその甘さを捨てない限り何百回戦おうとこの私に勝利することはできないと思いますがね。
A wall of furies blocked our sight of Sanan-san and Sen, creating an impenetrable blockade.
お前らどけよこら！あの二人を追いかけねえと。
Each swing of Heisuke's blade produced a lurid splatter of blood drenching him from head to toe. Don't let the blood get on you! If you get bloodless, you'll...
無茶言うんじゃねえよ！これだけの数がいるのに！くそくそくそー！俺はどうして！
Heisuke began to shriek out of frustration. A cacophony of his cold steel splitting flesh and cracking bones echoed throughout the courtyard. Heisuke fought virtually against a seemingly endless tide of furies, each one yelping as their lifeless corpses dropped to the ground. Soon it seemed everywhere we looked, dismembered limbs oozing with blood were scattered. The nauseating scent of blood had clung to every surface in sight, and Heisuke stood in the middle of it.
取り逃がしちまった。
Heisuke was bathed in blood, a grotesque image made worse by the inescapable feeling of failure.
ごめんな、千鶴。お前の友達助けてやれなくて。
I just shook my head. Don't worry. sorry about that. There wasn't much else I could say. All the Furies strewn across the blood-soaked ground, they lived ordinary lives. None of them were criminals or thieves or any number of epithets that perhaps are used to justify their needless suffering. Just innocent people whose ambitions and dreams were crushed by the will of one despicable being. And now, they had their lives taken at the end of Heisuke's sword, which still dripped with blood. It seemed impossible to believe this sentiment escaped someone so affable and kind-hearted as Heisuke.
俺もきっとそう遠くないうちにこうなるんだろうな。
Heisuke.
罪もねえ人間をこんなに殺して自分だけ死にたくねえなんて虫が良すぎるもんな。
Heisuke was determined to tear himself apart, one painful realization at a time. His shoulders were slumped, covered in a thin layer of film forming from the drying blood. Never had I seen him so disheartened by the act of killing. His heart seemed so heavy, worn by the unshakable guilt that his powers were more potent in taking lives than in protecting his own.
寿命を使い果たして死んだ後はやっぱり地獄行き間違いなしかな。
Just stop it! Stop talking, alright? I grabbed a hold of Heisuke's sleeve and interrupted his self-deprecating tirade. I began sobbing uncontrollably. Why did Heisuke, of all people in the world, have to suffer so much agony? No matter what anyone says to you, Heisuke, none of this is your fault. You know that more than anyone else. I understand this of you. So please, don't put all of the blame on yourself anymore.
千鶴。
Heisuke murmured my name once. Then together we basked in the silence, waiting for the dawn to erase this traumatic night from memory.